Jeremy, dear, are you ready? Hi. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies for being late. It appears that the British Weather has decided to make up for lost time in terms of the rain. And I went to go and find an umbrella so I didn't get completely drowned. But thank you very much indeed for coming. In terms of an agenda, apologies for absence. I know Susie Horton is away.
Councillor
and
Wood.
Rob Wood is away as well. Are we all here apart from that? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Matt is on. Okay, I think Matt will be, it should be around then. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Any declarations of interest, colleagues? Nope. And we have to then do a forward plan omission about Victory Energy to say that it wasn't on the forward plan, but we have gone through the right procedures and we're allowed to discuss it. Is that correct, Michael?
That's correct.
Thank you very much indeed. So move on to Victory Energy, and initially my apologies. I had thought that PricewaterhouseCoopers would be here to present their apology, but they have exited. And so we don't have them here, which is a pity, but these things happen. But we have 3 deputations. It would be useful to hear colleagues' views before we then go into the report. So I've Councillor Donna Jones, Jerry Brown, and a late request from Hilary Reid. So colleagues, do you want to come to the table? And we'll go through things from there, if that's all right. So, colleagues, do please come forward. Come and have a seat. So Donna, do you want to go first? Do you want to go second? Do you want to go third? Do you want to go fourth? Well, okay, I was trying to be polite. That's all right, no problem. In which case, Jerry, as your request was in on time, I think the floor then is yours. I hope that is all right, Hilary, is it? Oh, Hilary, you go first. Fine.
Go. Mine's warm up to Jerry.
Okay. Lovely. Welcome, Hilary.
Thank you. This is just a short comment, really, and on the 4 proposals in front of us. I was looking at the executive summary where I noticed that in paragraph 1.1, the primary purpose to establish the Victory Energy Company is primarily for sustainability of future services and for reducing fuel poverty. I agree with those objectives, and yet I see no mention of how this reducing fuel poverty will be measured in future. Then I wanted to go on to paragraph 13, where the preliminary equality impact assessment has been abandoned and a decision that an EIA does not in any case apply to a commercial enterprise, albeit that PCC backs it, and a build-out cost of 1.5 million already, with overheads, so going on towards 2 million of public money has already been spent. So is there an EIA for that? I agree that the success of all the proposals rests on strong governance, agile business plan, etc. Yet there's not much confidence and assurance provided from management of existing PCC budgets. For example, the underspends on the education budget and on the 200,000 government grant returns for homeless people. So the interface between the City Council and the shareholder consumer will need to be considered, but that relationship isn't described in any great detail. And will residents get to see in a timely, open way the shareholders' agreement mentioned? Who will get to scrutinise that? The Gas Committee has been asking for details of work in progress on this for a couple of meetings. So finally, I would also like to recommend that I support option 4 for the white label option for this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Harry, now my apologies. I should have said at the beginning, this is of course being live streamed as all Cabinet meetings are. There's a fixed camera at the back, so it'll mainly show people's backs, but I hope you're okay to be live streamed. All three of you have been to many, many meetings, so it'll be as no surprise to you. I hope that's all right. Fine, Matthew, welcome. Do you have any interests you wish to declare?
I don't. Apologies for lateness. Apologies for doing an impression of a drowned rat as I come in. It's a bit damp out there if you're on your bike.
Yes, I'm not. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, frog in throat. And Michael, what's Matthew's position? Is he okay to be taking part and voting on this item?
Absolutely.
Good, lovely. That is a good thing. Thank you very much indeed. So, followed by Jerry Brown. Welcome, Jerry. Knowing how fulsome your deputations are, I'll waive at a minute to go. Is that all right? You're on.
Okay, so
Do you want to put your microphone on, Jerry?
right, there we go. So a bloke from round the corner pops into your office and says he's got a whizzer of an idea and you want to pay him a lot of money to set it up. And you do. And you use my money. And then you borrow money in my name to do it without asking me. And that's about where we are with this. So there's been no reporting on this energy company until yesterday. On the 1st of September 2017, in a meeting with Chris Ward, the S151 officer, I requested that the energy company have a fully independent non-executive director and that the business case be made public along with the operating model. And that didn't happen. Chris didn't agree with it. In a subsequent full council meeting, I repeated this request and yet again at 2 PCC governance and audit meetings with the full cross-party support of the committee, and yet the answer I got from Councillor Donna Jones at the time was that she told me she was the independent director because she had appointed herself to the job. On the 17th of November 2017, I had a meeting with the City Solicitor, Mr Lawther, and the then Deputy City Solicitor, Mr Parkin, where I was promised feedback and information on the energy company, but no feedback or information occurred. I was told that after I'd been given that information, we would have a subsequent meeting to discuss any issues that the material raised, but no meeting took place because no materials were ever provided. One might ask, how are the suppliers being selected and how that process is being assured by the directors, and whether Beringa, who wrote the initial review of the business case, might be one of those future suppliers. It's worth noting that the amount of money that's reported as being spent on Vessel is an underestimate. That's because PCC provides Vessel, the private company, with office space, administrative and technology support, legal and accounting services, and all without even nominal accounting. By my estimate, PCC have spent about £250,000 in supporting Vessel, and that's not recorded. What value would have been added in other areas of PCC had that effort been spent on Vessel? And I note that whilst we can find lots of money to support the establishment of an energy company, we managed to underspend the schools budget last year by £138,000. I think we should spend the education budget before we subsidise a private company to gamble on the energy futures market. So as I looked back over the last 18 months last night, I asked myself some questions, and they included, so just how did this get started? Who chose the staff? Did PCC receive any offers of help to analyse the initial business case? And how did PCC approve a business plan with these technical and financial risks apparent? Or did they not know about the risks? What are the names of the people who approved the business case, and who are the directors of Vessel who bear responsibility for this? Where are the minutes of the governance and review meetings necessary for an enterprise of this scale and risk? And what is the bid review process? Nobody knows. And which recruitment companies have been used? I note that the estimated cost of closure of the enterprise is £2.5 to £3.5 million, but if you made it insolvent, you could take £1 million at least off that number. And if you want, I'll give you details later on how you do that. And the fallback position, the customer book value of £11.5 million, is itself based on achieving the number of clients in the plan. So it's a bit circular. So if Vessel achieves 144,000 clients, then the fallback plan is irrelevant. But if they don't achieve 144,000 clients, then the fallback plan is useless. The revised business case has still not been shared with any councillors, to my knowledge. There are no records of any governance meetings, and the current leader hasn't been invited to any since the start of his tenure in May. And yet this is where key decisions are being made, or not. The sales and marketing plan is new, unproven and risky, yet it is the base on which the success of the company is built, according to PwC, and the internal rate of return is a minus number. A huge difference, yet Vessel bases its calculations on the profit and loss account and not on the standard method of cash flow analysis. This risible lack of accountability, the city solicitor promised to report back to the PC Governance and Audit Committee and then just didn't turn up, the absolute lack of transparency, the absence of independent members on the board, the lack of any discussions of other options, the sales and marketing plan that is very, very optimistic and a fallback plan that relies on the success of the sales plan, and no clear project director. It all adds up to a project that smells like dead fish. Now, given it's been a catalogue of cock-ups so far, what is now going to change to stop this sorry Groundhog Day debacle from dying on its feet? But in the end, though, despite all these complaints and questions, the whole thing can be boiled down to a single yes-no question in order to get to today's decision. Given the recent history of opaqueness, no reporting, no governance, a business plan that the independent assessor says has a negative return, a complete lack of independent members of the board, are you cabinet members sufficiently confident of the future success of the company such that you would put your own money into it and stake your own career on it? It's a yes or no question. And how much of your money would you put up? Thank you, Gerald. I'm nearly there. If cabinet members aren't prepared to be named as personally responsible for the success of this company, then there isn't sufficient confidence in the way forward and it should be halted. That's how it works in big corporations. And if PCC wants to play in the business world, then it has to act like it's a business. And the cheapest way to halt the venture is to make the company insolvent. But that has very severe implications for the directors and for other people, including officers. So let's remember this is a business venture, not a social action project. Last paragraph. But if cabinet members are prepared to be named as personally responsible for the success of this venture, then they should consider carefully its likelihood of success and vote accordingly. But they should ask themselves just what has changed and will continue changed so as to warrant the governance, reporting and controls in the future. Personally, I err on the side of caution and I would recommend option 4, become a white label supplier. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Donna, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. Just to cover a couple of bits off before I get on to my deputation proper. In terms of governance, when we took the decision to proceed with an outline business case, we set up a vessel, Victory Energy Services. At that point, it wasn't called that. It was just the Energy Governance Board because the company wasn't named. I chaired them, and the governance for this company has been conducted through the Energy Board meetings, which I chaired, and I think I attended the last one at the beginning of March, just before Purdah. So governance has been carried out thoroughly. It's been checked by both auditors and also by the best energy solicitors in the country, and it complies with everything that we should be doing. Secondly, in terms of project directors, well, Chris Ward is the PCC project director, and of course Dan O'Hara as the chief executive has always been the vessel director, and that has never been in question. I am also pleased to confirm to you that we had to check as a local authority and the Conservative administration that we had fit and proper people working within this business. They weren't just people that you could have met in the local supermarket and said, hey, come and work for this company. And actually, Cameron McKenna Stewart, some of the best solicitors, as I say, actually in Europe, not just in the UK, carried out a full and thorough fit and proper person check on all of the key appointees into the business. And that carries on to this day, I understand. And also, having councillors here, the public do have their eyes, their ears, their people to make those decisions. We are democratically elected. Now moving on to my deputation proper. So I wanted to start with why, 18 months ago, under my leadership, we decided to embark on the idea of Portsmouth City Council owning an energy supply company. So the why was really threefold. Firstly, to generate income, because we believe that there are energy companies in this country that make money, and you know that the income generation element was a big thing about, of my administration, and we created just under £10 million of new income in about 2.5 years when you factor in the gross profit from the property investment portfolio. Now, some of the things was slightly lower hanging fruit. When you then look to future ideas of how to generate income, it becomes slightly more difficult. And ultimately, when you are working in a commercial way, things aren't completely straightforward as they normally would be in the world of local government. And actually, income generation, as I say, was a key theme. Secondly, it was about green energy. It was about wanting to give our residents the opportunity to be able to consume energy in a way that hurts the environment less than the most, normal models of how you generate electricity in the UK. And thirdly, the community fund. And that for me was a really big thing. If you've got a community fund, you could choose to spend some of that community fund on helping people in fuel poverty. Now, some energy companies like Robin Hood have made that a really clear steer from the outset of the ideology of the company. I wanted the council, the executive, yourselves, to be able to make the decision about how you spend that community fund. And you may choose to bring in third sector partners to help you spend it, but ultimately, if you choose to spend some of the community element on helping people in fuel poverty, that is obviously within your gift. Now, when we look at what's going on in the market at the moment, and you look at companies like Arisa, who have gone bust in the last week, energy companies, they did achieve 100,000 customers in their first year. Robin Hood Energy also achieved 100,000 customers in their first year. And of course, there is, the questions and the risk that comes from whether or not Victory can hit the customer acquisition numbers that are in the business case, both top, bottom and middle of the road numbers, is one of the key considerations for you today. So what's the difference between us and Arisa? What we know is you can get customers fairly easily if you go onto price comparison websites and you put yourself in the price market, lowest in class. But it's whether or not you've got the cash flow. And with all of the energy companies that have gone bust, such as GB Energy, it was ultimately the cash flow of being able to buy energy, so, energy trading, that actually hurt them as their numbers grew. Their capacity to buy energy in millions, hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds, really actually is where they got caught out. As a local authority, we don't have that issue as the parent company. Then we move on to the price cap. So we know there's been a significant change since my administration took a decision in July last year to proceed with the full business case. And actually, I think there is some positive for this company from the price cap that's been introduced, or the announcement of a price cap coming in by the government. Those kind of energy companies like Arisa, who put themselves in the top 5 on comparison websites, are undoubtedly now probably putting their heads in their hands and thinking, what are we going to do? Because their entire marketing strategy has been based on being cheapest in class. That was never our aim. Our aim was to give a whole life service where you are educating your customers, you're not the cheapest or the most expensive, you are good value, middle of the road, and you are helping your customers to save money, therefore being the cheapest, by reducing their energy consumption. But secondly, the marketing strategy for this business has been about face-to-face. It's been about playing on the unity that we have here in the city. And that's often played out through the football club, as we know, and the strength of the Supporters Trust, who formed and got our club out of administration. So how can we use that kind of strength in this city to take things forward? I think the face-to-face element, if you're not going on cheapest in class with the energy price cap, it means that our USP of marketing our company is going to help us. Technological advances and people now having electric cars. I've got an electric car in my home. We've got a charging point at our house. Because you're fueling your car by electricity, it makes you think even more about where you're getting your electricity from. The business model is based on domestic energy only. There is an opportunity for non-domestic energy consumption, and that could literally quadruple the turnover of the company and therefore increase the profits dramatically. I'd already had conversations with QA Hospital, with the Naval Base, about their combined heat and power plants and the byproduct that will come off of that, which will be steam, and how Victory could work with them to use some of that. With schools, the civic officers ourselves, when we get out of our contract, which we have to give a 2-year notice period. When this company is able to move into the non-domestic market, this will really help it. I'm just finishing up because I know that I've come to my time. I think it is about future-proofing this business. I think it is, in conclusion, to say that actually, through the PwC report, through Baringa, through CMS, you have got 3 reports that all say that this is an investable business. You've also had from PwC, and I've met with a gentleman myself this morning, that well-run energy businesses don't go bust. And I've got that written down. Also, we've got that Vessel's business case is achievable. We've had feedback from PwC that there is strong governance in place. We've had feedback from PwC that we have a strong and experienced management team. And I think the final comment from me, because I appreciate I'm running out of favours from Gerald now, is this. In the Council's medium-term financial economic forecast, we have put in the budget £2 million of income per year from year 5 onwards. If you don't go ahead with this today, and I appreciate that this is not risk-free, and I appreciate this is not a straightforward decision, but for me it's a bigger risk for you if you don't go ahead, because you are effectively increasing the budget costs, the budget cuts that you're going to have to make in the future, because we have forecast that £2 million of income from year 5 onwards into the council's budget, and if you don't go ahead with this today, tomorrow you need to start thinking about how you're going to generate that extra £2 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay at the table if you want to, colleagues. If, there's no need to disappear, but as you wish. Thank you very much indeed. Chris, thank you very much for your report. Is there anything you would like to add to it?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would actually.
Fire away.
I think members will have realised by now, given that we've done quite a number of briefings, that this is really quite a very important decision for the council. We've had a number of presentations that we've provided to you, probably over the last 3 days. Some of those presentations lasting as long as 3-4 hours, maybe, late into the night. And I'm grateful for everybody that's attended those meetings, because they were really helpful, and I thought it was good engagement with all members. Those presentations really covered 3 things. They gave you the opportunity to understand the Victory Energy proposition in more detail than had previously been the case. Also to understand the business case in more detail. You had the opportunity to review, and particularly hear from PwC, but also review the 3 independent expert reviews that have taken place over the last 12 months. And you've had a report from me, obviously, that's come to this meeting that summarises all of the expert reviews, as well as the overall potential investment return to the council, but also the overall risks for the council. So you've had all of that information to date. And the general thrust of the report really suggests that there are 4 key ingredients to a successful business and a successful energy business. The first being strong governance, the second being a talented management team, and that talented management team is also part of the risk management framework, having an agile business plan, and having robust risk management. Of all of the independent expert reviews, I think there's general consensus that all of those things are in place. So what you're left with then is 2 broad options, which I'd like to describe as option 1 is cease. That obviously involves the white label option as well, but it is effectively ceasing the Victory Energy company. Option 2 is to proceed, or the broad option 2 is to proceed, and you have 2 variants of proceed in the options before you. Should the Cabinet choose to cease, then obviously that will involve the write-off of between £2.5 and £3.5 million. It does avoid any further risk for the council, but obviously the flip side of that is that it denies any further opportunities of reward for the council. Should the Cabinet choose to proceed, I think there's a few benefits for residents, as well as the financial risks and rewards associated with that. Firstly, it's about cheaper energy for residents. It's about 100% renewable energy for our residents. But in terms of the financial risks and rewards, you'll probably recall, and it's set out within the paper, that if you believe the base case, Victory Energy's business plan suggests that the overall investment return over the 5-year period that we've done, that the modelling has been projected over, makes a return of just over £24 million. However, PwC's review quite rightly pointed out a couple of significant risks, and they presented 2 further scenarios. It's worth bearing in mind that the Victory Energy business plan itself has 8 scenarios modelled against it. So what we now have, I believe, is 10 potential scenarios that have been modelled that could be the potential outcomes of the council's pursuit of Victory Energy if it chooses to do that. PwC's downside scenario 2, as it's described, is the most severe of all of the 10 scenarios that have been modelled. And that scenario suggests that, well, if we take the other part of PwC's advice, which is this should be viewed as a longer term investment, investments of this nature rarely start to pay back until years 4 and year 5, which is exactly replicated in PwC's scenario, or their downside 2 scenario. So in modelling that downside 2 scenario over a 10-year period, that makes a total investment return for the council of £50 million. So the risks associated with the proposition that's before you have been layered into PwC's downside scenario, and the £50 million over 10 years is what is expected to be achieved if we follow that downside scenario path, and there was no mitigating action to remedy the position over that period. Should the administration choose to take that option, to take the option to proceed with the company, my strong recommendation would be that they take the advice that was given to us by Beringa, which was take a decision to proceed on the basis of what's described as a staged gate approach. Now, a staged gate approach is actually risk mitigation for the council. It means that you're not taking that 10-year decision today, you're effectively taking a 1-year decision, because the stage gate approach means that you award future funding on an annual basis, and on that basis you get to review previous performance. How well is the company doing against the business plan? Do you believe that the future business plan will be productive and it will achieve the types of returns that are put forward to you? So for you, if you are minded to proceed with the proposal to proceed, then you should do so on that basis. It gives you the opportunity to make individual decisions every year, and it manages the council's financial risk position. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. If I start the discussion, and then we'll see where we go from there. I think it has been well known within the council that I have had significant concerns about this, and I think it is worth going through those in some detail, so we have an understanding of maybe where we're going to go. I think our job as a council is to look at the level of risk that we are prepared to cope with, and this is not about risking our own money. This is about risking public money, which I think means it's even more important that we try to make sure that we get this right. There are too many occasions where councils have tried to do things where they've not got the skills to do it and have ended up losing public money. And sometimes losing public money for a council is not that painful, but it should be, because that's money that could have been used for other things. So I think my worry is about the level of risk that we're asking the council to take by entering into this area of business. So I think the areas that are of concern for me have always been and remain the number of customers that are expected to be recruited, and then the amount of money will be generated. In the first business plan, as my understanding is that that was presented a year ago, we were looking at 25,000 customers being recruited in the first year. That then increased to 44,000 customers being recruited each year to get to just break even, and in the presentation we saw yesterday it was up to 50,000 customers in the first year. I'm not the only person to have had concerns about this. PricewaterhouseCoopers have said that the 50,000 is far too many and should be reduced by half, back down to the 25,000. I've also got considerable concern about how those people are to be recruited, those customers are to be recruited. The idea has been to have a face-to-face predominantly way of recruiting people from a variety of different means, whether that's cold calling on people's doors, about going to community events with a stall and trying to talk to people there, or about phoning them on their telephones, cold calling them there, as well as supplementing that by other means. I am concerned that energy companies have had a bad reputation for selling in some of those ways, and I've been interested that both PricewaterhouseCoopers and Victory Energy have described this sales technique as being untried and untested, and I think we have a duty to look as a council about whether we're happy with a way of recruiting customers which is described as untried and untested. And then we've got to look at the number of sales per sales operative. When I've talked to people in the industry, 2.5 sales to 3 sales is a norm. In the most recent business case presented by Victory Energy, it was over 6 sales per day, which is over double the industry standard, and PricewaterhouseCoopers have said that they don't think that is accurate. So we've been presented by a report with PricewaterhouseCoopers that came to 3 conclusions, as I could see. The first was that the profits are overstated in the business case as presented by Victory Energy. The second is that the costs are too low, as presented in the business case, and the third is that the number of sales are too high. So I think that's a real cause for concern, and I think looking at the PwC review and where they've got to, they've said that there is the possibility of a profit of 1.5 or 1.6 million pounds in year 5 or 6, and I think, Chris, you put it even later. But the amount of money that the council will have to lend Victory Energy is over £15 million of public money. So I have significant concerns about this. I am disappointed in some ways that this has ended up both under the previous Conservative administration but also under our administration as being mainly a debate conducted by the party in power. The idea of creating this energy company came before Cabinet, and we are back here in Cabinet just a year later. We haven't had any cross-party briefings or governance reviews over that last year. Those governance reviews have taken place between the directors, 2 of them council officers and a councillor, and a consultant for the council. So there has been no build-up of support for what this company has been wanting to do across the council, and I think that's a real shame, because I think that's completely different from when the council bought MMD. That was a cross-party decision taken at full council, which everybody opted into, and it has had support across the city ever since. So I think I am really sad that way of building support for this company and this venture has not been taken, and I think that's been reflected. I've emailed every councillor last night during the briefing that was open to all councillors to say, any thoughts, any ideas, do come and speak at Cabinet, do email me. I've had not one single email back. At the meeting last night, with 2 Conservative members kindly attended and 1 Labour member, and here we have just 1 member of the opposition here at Donna, and I'm incredibly grateful for her for coming. And that worries me considerably, that we have people who are not engaged in this process, and this is hugely important. So I am worried. I'm also very concerned that the feedback from PricewaterhouseCoopers was that the price cap that is coming in has not been factored into the business case. We know that it will reduce the margins, and I'm worried by that. So Chris, in his report, in his presentation just now, talked about the 4 things that lead to success: strong governance, talented senior management team, agile business plan, and robust risk management. And those all lead to success. My concern is I have questions over each and every single one of those areas. I have concern over governance because it has been, there has been no public governance of it, and I don't see any confidence in that on an ongoing way. I don't think anybody across the city and the council has known what is going on, and I think that's a real failing. In terms of an agile business plan, and a business plan that does not include recognition of a price cap that we know is coming, has been announced by the Prime Minister, is not to me a business plan that gives me confidence. And that leads to a senior management team who I don't know, but people who are prepared to put their name to that business plan, which doesn't include the price cap, again causes me significant concern. And again, robust risk management, again, I don't know and don't see robust risk management here. So Chris' response to me when I said to him I was uncertain and unsure about all those 4 things, Chris's response to me was, in which case we shouldn't proceed. And I think, Chris, I'm going to take your advice, that I've not been able to be persuaded that there are any of those 4 things in place. I think that's really unfortunate for the City Council, really unfortunate for the people of the city. And so it is, I think, with enormous regret and great sadness, and I wish we weren't in this place, that I think I'm going to be recommending to the Cabinet that we choose that we will not proceed further with this. Colleagues, David.
I just
Of course you
clarify
can.
one thing, because I think it's really important
Absolutely.
this decision is made on the right basis.
Abs-
And I think you said that PwC didn't believe that the number of customers, the customer growth could be achieved, and recommended that it be cut by half. The recommendations of PwC are set out on page 49 of your report. On the recommendation on customer growth, they say delivering customer growth numbers appears achievable over the 5-year plan period based on market benchmarks. However, achieving these targets will be challenging given the distinct nature of the current marketing and sales strategy, and given many features have not been tested. They then go on to say, and I think this is really important members understand this, what they say is, but there is a route by which Vessel could achieve those numbers by changing their sales technique if their current technique doesn't work. They acknowledge that that would cost more to get those numbers, but that additional cost is built into their business plan, which proved positive. And I think it's really important that we're clear about that.
David, I absolutely accept that, and thank you for that. I think one of the things that's been told to us about the company is that the way they're planning to get customers makes them unique and a particularly good reason to invest, or rather lend public money. To move to just being on the price comparison websites is a very different proposition, and would leave us in exactly the same place as the many of the other companies that are trading in this position. But thank you for that, David. Colleagues, anybody else? Jeanette, Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Gerald. Obviously, this comes into my portfolio for resources. I don't profess, though, to know anything about energy, and I never have. But I do know about the social agenda, and I do know balance sheets when I see them, and I've been around them a long time. So when this was given to me, the first thing I was looking at is what is the benefit to the community? So looking at the Victory Community Fund, and I noticed in Victory's own literature, it says for every customer who joins us, we'll make a contribution to Community Fund. We'll use the money to support projects and good causes in the community. We'll keep you updated on the projects we've supported on our website. Now that alarm bell started ringing a little bit because although it's an arm-length company, it's supposed to be that community fund come back to PCC so we could spend how we wanted it on which community projects. But for a long time, somebody ages ago said to me, words are words, and that seems like Victory Energy will have some say on where that community fund goes. And then I turned to risk, and the risk of spending public money in this way is difficult, and sometimes we have to speculate. So we need to look at the risk and how high that risk is and whether it's worth taking. If the project was specifically looking at the vulnerable in our society, looking at fuel poverty, and dealing with that, then I could say, well, that might be a risk worth taking, but it's not. It's not doing that. It's looking across the board and then to the wider area to try and get those numbers to the amount that they can. And the problem with risk is nobody knows. Nobody knows in this room whether you will hit your targets. You think you might, and that's laudable that you think you might, but nobody knows. Nobody knows whether we're going to lose money or whether we're going to get the 50 million. And the trouble is, we have to make a decision whether to take that huge risk and plough more money into it, which is not our money. And then I go back to deputations, and I thank all three of them for their deputations. And the question is, would you put your own money into it? No. And would you stake your own career on it? Absolutely not. It's too much of a risk for public money, and I would want that money spent more wisely in services that we already have, debt advisors to housing to, and use the money to build more homes, to cut fuel poverty. And to me, that is what we're here for, to use public money for public services, not to prop up an energy company.
Thank you. Councillor Darren Sanders.
Thank you, Gerald. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time over the last few weeks to educate the new administration about Victory Energy. I think this is my 4th session going through the company, and I'm grateful to everyone for putting up with me and everyone else. I have a slightly different responsibility, I think, to everyone else here, in that my job involves overseeing 15,000 council homes, and many people living in those are among the poorest in the city. Therefore, actually, the team that I report to me is actually potentially an important customer for Victory Energy. 15,000 properties, quite a lot. And so my attitude to the company is shaped accordingly, guided by 3 principles: cutting fuel poverty, doing right by the people who live in the homes, and my financial responsibility to ensure that the funding gap that this council faces is bridged as quickly and as painlessly as possible. Now, fuel poverty matters in this city. More than 1 in 7 people in this city live in it. Cutting that and the often heartbreaking choices that were outlined by Councillor Oudie at the briefing last night between heating and eating, for instance, is crucial to me. In the presentation last night, in the all-councillor briefing Gerald referred to earlier on, Victory Energy very kindly spoke about how it would tackle fuel poverty. Much of that focused on discussing with people in fuel poverty how they could cut bills, change boilers, etc. My problem with that is that Victory is asking us to put millions of pounds of council cash into them when the council is doing much of that fuel poverty work already, especially with council tenants. Through the Local Energy Advice Programme, the council offers advice on switching services, changing behaviours, things like draft proofing and debt advice too. It's already helped hundreds of the fuel poor in this city save hundreds of thousands of pounds with that approach. The council is also already installing gas boilers, insulating homes and upgrading heating systems, and has just got money to install first-time central heating systems to vulnerable households. On top of that, our responsibilities as a landlord mean we do things like fix boilers already. So therefore, in terms of fuel poverty, it's not clear to me what Victory Energy can do for council tenants that we cannot do ourselves. My second responsibility is to do right by people who live in council homes. A large part of the Victory Energy offer, as I understand it, is to build up such a good relationship with its hard-to-switch target audience that not only will the company, not their friends or family, the company be the first person they talk to about energy, but it also means the relationship is so good that it will enable the company to sell additional services too. Now, the issue again with council properties is that its sales force will do much of what we do already. Council people already have the sort of relationships Victory wants to establish with many of its target audience. Indeed, I was told yesterday about one person who we are moving from one block to another, a pensioner, who we, as a council, lobbied to change from British Gas after 42 years with them. This is a day when British gas prices, as Dan and the team outlined last night, were going up. She wouldn't budge, despite her knowing the people concerned. She just wasn't budging, despite the price rises. This means that I'm aware of what is actually needed to create the sort of relationship, customer relationship Victory proposes if it is to maximise its own income. It takes time. It takes effort. And that, I know how much time and I know how much effort it takes. And again, that concerns me. One key difference with the council is that we can do things regarding energy in the context of debt advice, which is not something I've heard from Victory Energy. Another consequence of this responsibility is to ensure the cheapest possible deal for our residents. For instance, I set communal heating charges for about 1,200 properties. Now, Chris would be very impressed if 1,200 properties could come onto the business plan for Victory Energy in year one. But based on what I know about the tariffs behind those charges, and what I understand about Victory's tariffs, if we handed those properties to Victory when the contract comes up in September 2020, their bills would go up, not down. Now that means the council, not Victory Energy because of the offer they're putting forward, but the council will be ripping off those people. That can't happen. And as a result, I'm highly uneasy about backing a company that will go into council homes and offer a tariff that is not amongst the cheapest around. And this leads me on to my final responsibility, the financial one. I note on page 59 of the report, which is part of the PwC package, that it talks about a negative return. That's mentioned in Jerry Brown's deputation. I have to say that's the first time I've ever seen that, so I had to find out what it is, and I had to find out what it meant. And I have to say, well, Jerry might correct me if I'm wrong, but I have to say that didn't exactly encourage me. I have to say. So that concerns me. I'm also concerned that we max out the investment according to the numbers that Chris Ward has given by essentially selling the customer book. Now, if this leads to the odd situation of us maximising our investment by removing the council backing that is apparently incredibly important in terms of generating the company. We could sell it as a going concern, but that really does concern me, that we maximise our investment by selling a customer book, and with the fear the company may wither, the company may die, and I don't want to do that. But I'm also concerned about the costs facing us, because the picture that faces us is not good. According to Chris at last night's briefing, by 2020-2021 there'll be significant uncertainty over how local government will be financed. And that, frankly, is before Brexit's impact on our port. Therefore, we should be looking to generate income sooner rather than later, so we can insulate ourselves of what is coming. And indeed, when we question the previous administration's wisdom of investing in supermarkets in Somerset, we've always been told it's about getting cash in now, not later. Now, a selling point of Victory Energy outlined earlier on is it will bridge that gap. Yet in 3 years' time, when we need the money the most, what happens? We could be losing £12 million on that deal. And that figure is significant because that is the amount of money we're being forced to shed from council budgets. And Mr. Ward says realistically, Victory will start to make money for us not when we need it most, but around 2025, when actually we need to maximise our income sooner rather than later. So therefore, on these bases, I'm not blaming Victory for its approach. This is a great deal, what's on offer. Option 1 and option 3 is a great deal for them. However, for the people whose homes I oversee, it means gambling millions of pounds on an unproven business model that proposes to do a lot of things we did do, or were planning to do already, offer more expensive tariffs than the council can get, and leave us losing millions of pounds through it, particularly up front, just when we need the money the most. However, doing nothing is not an option. So therefore, what I want to suggest is an expanded version of option 4, which is that we cease investment in Victory Energy, whilst honouring in particular any solar PV contracts in particular it may have. We work with the Council's energy saving team to develop a comprehensive campaign to tackle fuel poverty. We resume and properly promote the Council's energy saving website if we can. We resume work on the PCC Trading and Electricity Company agreed by Cabinet in December 2016. We explore entering into a white label arrangement with an existing fully licensed energy supplier. Indeed, we were invited to join one such consortium just before Victory started to develop. Now, some people will say the cost of leaving is too high. I disagree, especially when we've been told that the Council set aside £5.6 million this year for Victory Energy. We must deal with fuel poverty. We must maximise income for when we need it, not for when we do not. The Victory model works for them, and it's great they've been putting it forwards, but it doesn't work for us. There's a better, less risky way that we can do that whilst offering a good deal for vulnerable people. It's time we did it. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Matthew at Winnington.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon Jackson. I'd like to start with a comment that was made by Councillor Jones in her deputation, something that leapt out at me. It was going to be, Victory Energy will be a good value, middle of the road company. In which case, my question, as I've been questioning for some time about Victory Energy, is why is it here? What are we actually trying to do? If it's just about money, I don't think that's enough. And I haven't heard anything in the presentations we've had, in the information we've had, that really sticks it out as something different from what already exists. Hilary Reid made her deputation and she mentioned about fuel poverty, something that has come out time and time again. But she also talked about the equality impact assessment, which didn't have anything in there which really addressed about what this would do for vulnerable people or the impacts it would have. Fuel poverty should be the place that we start at, not merely a byproduct. Again, we've heard, well, this could create money, which you could then do on reducing fuel poverty. That really isn't where we should be as a council, because really it's our people that come first. If you're a good core localist liberal, as I like to think I am, this is really important. You don't do things for money reasons. You do it because it's the right thing for your residents, for your people, for the people around you, the people who elect you, because after all, we are elected. We're not just floating elsewhere on our own, up in the clouds, as much as it seems like we sometimes do. This simply doesn't stack up if we've got that there. What's really concerned me is the aggressive marketing strategy we were told about when we had a briefing earlier this week. Going out to community meetings, this is neighbourhood forums or other things like that, going out and knocking on people's doors. It wasn't entirely clear whether you would take into account no cold calling zones or not. One person said, yes, we would just knock on the doors anyway, we've got a legal right. Someone else said, no, we won't. If there's confusion, then how is that going to be imparted to anyone who is going out and working for Victory Energy? I don't know. I also think we have to think about who is going to be targeted. We've been very specifically told that this would be targeted at people who don't switch. Councillor Sanders referred to someone who doesn't switch and won't switch. But who are these people? Generally, they're either older people, which makes them more likely to be vulnerable, or it means that they are, or it's often people who are low income, have mental health problems or other issues for which changing energy supplies is quite frankly not high up their list of doing things. So if those kind of people are going to be targeted, that gives me some real concerns. Again, who's the council doing this for? Is it for its people, or is it for itself? In the report, we are told that there is a potential, if we take either option 2 or option 4, of reputational damage. This is a thing that comes up quite a lot in local government reports, and we have to make decisions on, and I've seen it again over the years. I think actually there is a potential of reputational damage, but I think it's if you take option 1 or option 3, because I think there is a potential serious reputational damage to this council if we go ahead with this company, with the way that it wants to work. The other thing, I want to take what Jerry said in his deputation and slightly turn it around. And he said about, would you invest your money in this company? Would you stake your job on it? I'm going to turn it to something different. If I was working with a vulnerable person, would I recommend this company to them? If I had everything else there, would I say, don't go with them, go with this company, Victory Energy? No, I wouldn't. Because as Councillor Sanders said, they cannot guarantee that they're going to be one of the cheapest suppliers. So I'll leave you with this thought. If a single vulnerable person in this city pays a higher energy bill, then they have to because they've been specifically targeted by this council's Victory Energy business, then we have failed as a council and an administration. So I fully support Councillor Sanders' recommendation of an amended option 4. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Leader. I think there's one thing that we ought to make very clear today, and that is, as Councillor Jones brought up earlier on, I don't think anyone in the administration is suggesting for 1 second that the people who've been involved in developing vessel are not fit and proper. Nobody's said that, nobody's suggesting it, and I think it's very important that we bring that out today, and that we state it clearly. That is not the suggestion from the administration. We have also heard that they have expertise in the industry, and in the presentations that you've given us over the last few days, you've given us evidence of that and cited your credentials. Now, I don't have experience in the energy industry, but I have a very long and extensive experience in the pub industry. And I can remember all too well when the Thatcher government decided to break up the big breweries and introduce more competition in the market, which is what led us to pub companies. During that period of time, some very, very senior executive with decades of experience in that industry branched out into smaller businesses with expert teams, set up pub companies, and pursued the dream of branching out alone. Some of them succeeded, and some of them failed. That's not to say that they didn't lack the skills, the acumen and the expertise to deliver a successful business. It just means that the whole nature of business is that it is highly competitive, and sometimes even the best people fail. For us as an administration, when we are investing with public money, we have to decide, is it possible for even the best people to fail? And the answer has to be yes. It's unfortunate, but it is a reality of business, and anyone who pretends it's different is lying to themselves, and we as an administration just cannot accept that responsibility. Now, we've heard some terms used today that underline this. And the first one is this an investable business? Yes, it is. It's a business that there is a risk involved with, that it is possible to invest in, and it is possible to get a return on, and we've heard all sorts of balance of probabilities as to whether that may happen. But colleagues, I can tell you that I have seen investable businesses invested in nationally by some very big players and some very significant people with a lot of wealth to throw around, and those businesses fail. The reason we know who Richard Branson is, for example, or Mr. Dyson, is because they are exemplars in the marketplace. We are saying that as a local authority, working with a small group of individuals, we can be an exemplar in the marketplace, an outlier. We're not talking about being a business like any other. We're talking about being an outlying business with a different model that is untried and untested according to the PwC report. Those words have stuck with me ever since I read that report because they're repeated in it. Untried and untested. Could it work? Yes, it could. Could the council make the £50 million that the Director of Finance has mentioned? Yes, it could. But it could also lose a rather large amount of money and not get it back, because nobody in this room is able to answer this question. What is the absolute limit of the amount of money that this council would have to invest in Vessel to guarantee getting their money back? Vessel don't know that. PwC don't know that. The council's 151 officer does not know that, because it is impossible to launch a commercial business with a cast iron guarantee that you know what that figure is and when it will be repaid. So that leaves us with risk. And once you look at risk, you have to decide whose money you're risking, whether it's appropriate to risk it in the first place, and in all likelihood, will you get your money back? Now, if you're investing in a tried and tested business model, not an untried and tested business model, there is still a risk. There is a risk that the market will change. We heard from Vessel last night that they recognise volatility in the marketplace and the fact that the sands constantly move, and they're comfortable with that because that's part of that model. I understand that, but as a council, being comfortable with that is not a place that we can afford to be in. Public money is a huge responsibility, especially when we're talking about these kind of figures. And we have to collectively decide, given an environment where there's a £12 million downward pressure on our revenue budget over the next 3 years, if we will do anything at all to compromise further the services that we as an administration have to deliver to this city. And for me, the answer is that this is a step too far.
Colleagues, I haven't had anybody else who's indicated to speak. I'd like... Oh, Chris. And I was just going to add one thing to Darren's proposals. Chris.
Two things, really. Aside from being misquoted a number of times, which I think is unfortunate, I think either misquoted or certainly misinterpreted in terms of the numbers that have been presented as the kind of key risk position of the council. I think my report makes it clear that the key risk position of the council is about £6.5 million, that the quotes around 15 million, 12 million and other numbers that have been suggested are clearly not accurate, and they're certainly not the key measure of financial risk for the council. Secondly, the proposed amendment to the recommendations I don't believe is capable of being adopted, because it's not set out where the funding is coming from. The funding for this venture was by way of loan because it would be repaid. The types of expenditure that were explained by Councillor Sanders are not appropriate to be funded by loan.
Okay, thank you for that, Chris. So two things. My understanding from the meeting last night was the figure of the maximum loan that was suggested by PwC was over £19 million, which was on their slide. Was I wrong with that?
I have attempted to explain that in the past,
Yeah.
And I've explained it in the body of the report. On the PwC downside scenario, the maximum exposure of the council is £6.5 million.
Okay, thank you. I think we took a different number, but anyway,
I'll explain. The £19.1 million is backed by assets which are saleable.
Yeah.
So it's not a key measure of risk.
Okay, but that assumes that that we get the numbers of customers in, and that each of them has the sale value that is put in there. Is that correct, Chris?
As does the 19.1 million.
Okay,
so
thank you.
It's not about the sale value of the company.
Yeah, it's the sale value of each customer.
It's the sale value of the commodity that has been purchased, which in this case is energy, which would then be sold.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. And my apologies if you've been misquoted. I think the only time I have quoted you is when we looked at the 4 key things. That was fine. That if I am, and you're happy with that, thank you very much indeed. So if we're not happy that there's strong governance, strong talented management team, an agile business plan, and a robust business management, your suggestion to me was that if we're not confident we have those things, then we don't have the route to success. Is that right, Chris?
My advice is exactly, if those things do not exist, then you shouldn't proceed with the venture. My comment on that was the independent expert reviews that have been undertaken all have a consensus that those things are in place.
Okay, thank you.
Leader, sorry, could I interject?
Of course, Michael.
Just to try to assist, bearing in mind what Chris has said with regard to option 4, if it's members' desire to proceed with option 4, can I suggest that perhaps at this stage you proceed without the additional amendments which Councillor Sanders has suggested, and we can look at that and come back and work up something for a future meeting. At least that will move us forward, if that's your wish from today.
Yeah, and I think I was going to suggest 2 others, and I'll see what you think, Michael. The first is to say that we should engage external professional help to try to make sure that as we wind this company up, it's done at the lowest possible cost to the City Council. You're nodding at that. And the second is, and this is to formalise something I've asked Chris to do, is to come forward to the City Council with an income generation policy, which I know Chris is working on, but that should go to everybody at the council, all 42 councillors across all parties, to make sure that we are all bought into a policy of trying to make sure we have an income generation policy that we all have confidence in. Councillor Darren Sanders, the advice. So I'm trying to work through, Chris, which bit of Darren's things has a financial cost. Can you go, Darren, can you read them out one at a time, please, and see which ones Chris thinks has a...
Yes, I'm happy to. I mean, if Chris is unhappy with this, then I'm happy to proceed on the basis of option 4 with the comments that Michael has said, because I think it's important that we do tackle some of the issues that are in here. And also we look at other ways that we can maximise income sooner rather than later. So what I suggested was effectively incorporating option 2 into this package, just to confirm that we cease investment in Victory Energy. My belief is it's while honouring any solar PV contracts in particular it may have. That's just to say that we just honour what we do. And from what I understand from what's gone on before, between options 2 and 4, that's where we are. So I may be wrong on that. My second point was we work with the Council's energy saving team to develop a comprehensive campaign to tackle fuel poverty. That's building on the work that they're currently doing at the moment. It's working on the recent work we've secured in terms of installing first-time central heating systems. It's building on the work of the Local Energy Advice Programme. It's also building on the work of the Warm Homes Fund. I'd hope that that was sufficiently vague to pass both Christopher and Michael. If not, I'm happy to delete it.
Chris.
In the way it was described, it sounds like significant additionality. If it's not additionality and it's business as usual, then it's fine.
We work with the Council's energy saving team, so it's working with existing people to develop a comprehensive campaign to tackle fuel poverty. So it's working with people, as far as I can see.
Can I suggest just put in to look at developing?
I will look at, yeah. Okay, I'm fine with that. Third point, we resume and properly promote the Council's energy saving website. This is switch.portsmouth.gov.uk, which came into existence in the summer of 2016, but is now apparently dormant. Again, if Christopher or Michael has a problem with that, then I will delete it.
I think
if we can.
Yeah, okay. To try and summarise, when you described your amendment, Councillor Sanders, you also described it in the context of the £5.6 million that had been set aside. So my assumption was that you were seeking to use part of the £5.6 million, which is loan financing and to be repaid by Victory Energy in that scenario, That was the reason for my comment on the adoptability or otherwise of the recommendation.
Chris, I agree with you. I luckily wrote out my speech earlier on. And I didn't make the 5 points, but I then went on to say, some will say the cost of leaving is too high. I disagree, especially when told that the council has set aside the amount of money. So it should not be related to the 5 points that I put forwards. And apologies for misinterpretation or misquoting on my part. The next thing was that we resume work on something that was agreed at the Cabinet in December 2016, which was to allow the energy services team, which currently does work with local authorities, which I understand would not have been affected if we had continued with Victory Energy, essentially to set up its own company in order to access the commercial market. This would be in addition to the work that is currently done, and that's my reading of the December 2016 report. This would be in addition to the work it currently does in the local authority sector.
Okay, Michael is nodding. Christopher?
Sounds like it requires a business case to me.
And was that, was that produced after the December 16 meeting?
Even if it was, it's 2.5 years out of date.
Yeah. I think the December meeting was to agree the principle of the establishment of a company.
Okay.
I think
No, I'm sure there's a way around that
it would do no
to
harm
investigate.
for a business case to
Yep.
be brought back for
Fine.
members to
Yeah.
consider. So you
Okay.
can also understand the full remit which was proposed of that company, which was actually quite limited area of work.
Yeah, I have read the outline business case,
Yep.
and
But I
I'm
wouldn't-
fully aware of the issues,
I'm sure you
particularly
are.
around what they are. I merely said to resume work. And the final point is we explore entering into a white label arrangement with an existing fully licensed energy supplier, which is option 4. Apologies, Chris, if I have misinterpreted, misquoted anyone.
Okay, colleagues. So I think we have a series of recommendations, which also to include the idea that we will try to make sure that we get external support to make sure that we wind this operation up at the lowest possible cost. So, colleagues, can I see those in favour of that? Please show. Those against? No, that is carried. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues, and thank you everybody for your time this evening.